7 o'clock. We'll begin. Welcome to the November 14th Board of Selectmen meeting. The meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be shown on local access cable and online. If you'd please stand and join me in the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. First on the agenda, we have the hearing to consider the local tax property factor for fiscal year 2019. Pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 40, Section 56, Mass General Law, notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, November 14th, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Town Hall, 65 North Main Street, West Bridgewater, to consider the local tax property factor, specifically the issue of allocating local property tax levy among the 5 property classes: residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property for fiscal year 2019. Interested parties are invited to be present and to be heard. It's from the Board of Selectmen, and this was posted Thursday, October 25th, 2018. So I'll entertain a motion to open the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the hearing is open, but there has been a request to continue the hearing to, what is that date and time, David?
Yep, so the next one would be for our next meeting, which is December 5th, and it would be at 7 p.m. So I would ask for a vote to continue it to December 5th at 7 p.m., please.
So moved.
So I have a question. Why can't we get this done sooner? Why does it, last year we were, I think, into December setting the tax rate. Here we are again this year into December setting the tax rate. And
Yep, so the process is that the Board of Selectmen has the jurisdiction to decide as to what the split of the rate will be. However, in order to determine that, the assessors have to provide all of the documentation and analysis. It was anticipated that that analysis would be done today. To comply with state law, we have to post 14 days in advance. And when we posted, we believed at that point that the assessors would be ready. They have contacted me in the meantime and told me that they will not be. So at this point, the only appropriate thing to do is to continue the hearing until they provide the documentation, so that way the Board of Selectmen can act.
so considering 2 years in a row, it's not been done when we expected it to be done. What do we need to do at this point to get it done in time in 2019? I mean, I just think it's
I mean,
a little ridiculous.
As you know, it's not on this board.
right. But how can we get what we need from them in a reasonable amount of time?
So there's no doubt I sense your frustration, because our treasurer is here, and once we set the tax rate, the treasurer then has a lot of work to do at that point. And they have to be able to get all the tax bills out prior to 30 days in advance for the February 1st tax due date. My only recommendation at this point is that since the full board and usually the chairman of the board makes the presentation, is that at your next meeting, I think that the board needs to strenuously explain to the board and to the chair that you expect to set it in November, and that they need to make every effort in the future to comply with that wish.
So we can do that at the next meeting.
Yep, when they're here. Okay, so Eldon made a motion to continue.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's continued to December 5th at 7 p.m. And Scott Golder is here, the town treasurer, to discuss and sign the borrowing documents.
So we have the annual municipal purpose loan. This covers some capital projects from the past, including water meters, water tank, the painting of the water tank, a fire truck, and then this year we're adding on the traffic signals and the library roof project that were approved at the last town meeting. That loan is $2,263,500. We had 2 bids for it. The winning bid was Eastern Bank at a rate of $255. Any questions? So then we just need to sign the paperwork. to the note itself. Town clerk certificate. And 3 copies saying that it's tax exempt. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
All set?
All set.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, next we have the alcohol policy that we had discussed at a prior meeting. Tracy, do you want to talk about any changes that were made after that?
Sure. So the version that is in the packet before you incorporated all of the feedback from the last discussion that we had. It's also been reviewed by town council. So the only proposed changes that are not reflected in that version appear separately in the meeting packet. Selectman Grays had brought up a question regarding section F, hours of operation. So there were some proposed changes there that if you'd like to take a look at now, we can decide if we were going to incorporate those or what the board's wishes are there.
So I added that only because when I read it, it gave the impression that all you had to do was give notice. Change of hours didn't require any approval.
So I would suggest instead of that change, we change in the F1 that's in the current full policy, we change where it says reported to
Okay,
must be approved by the LLA. So essentially what you're saying, except I don't really like the emergency thing.
Well, that was what David mentioned to me about that was in the event of some emergency by the license holder, if they needed to be open for just an additional half an hour or open an additional half an hour prior to. I guess I'm thinking some sort
Well, they
of
should,
flood
yeah.
or.
I mean, I think open an additional amount of time is really, I can't see an emergency for them being open
Okay.
more. It would be less, I would think, if, I mean, there's reasonable things to close for if it's snowing, whatever.
I'm perfectly okay without the emergency language.
Okay, so just change it to must be approved by the LLA. Hours.
So if I'm understanding, so everything else is okay. I'll just delete the language that says any change in the license hours due to an emergency must
So I'm looking at what's in the full policy.
be. Okay, yep.
So hours of operation must be posted conspicuously. Any change in the hours of operation must be approved by the LLA and ABCC.
So you want to take out for approval after ABCC then? Otherwise it'll sound,
I just want that.
yeah, a little redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so take it. Yeah.
Okay, so I can make that change,
That work.
and if you're inclined to approve the policy this evening, I would just make one recommendation that you not make the changes effective until, I'd say maybe January 18th, which is the third Friday, to give Lorna the opportunity to go through the licensing cycle without causing confusion. and then being able to distribute it to the licensees and get it back signed.
Okay.
You might have a little bit better adoption that way.
Okay. Anything else from anyone?
Nope.
So is there a motion to accept the policy as amended to be implemented January 18th, 2019?
Motion to accept the policy as amended and effective January 18th.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Tracy, you sure you want to do this one? So our assistant town administrator, Tracy Aldrich, has submitted her resignation. We are definitely sad to see you go, but we understand you accepted a great opportunity. And we definitely wish you the best of luck, and it's been a great, a little over 2 years.
Thank you, and thank the board, and thank you, David. I've had a great experience and have been afforded a lot of opportunities to learn, and I think I'll be a better resident for the experience.
I'm certainly going to miss it, Casey. You know, it seems that you're here longer than that, but it was really nice to work with you, and you did a great job for us.
You've been wonderful. In this short time, you've been wonderful to work with, Tracy. You are the ultimate professional.
Thank you.
Truly are.
Yeah, and if I could just echo that as well, you used the exact right word. You know, Tracy has just been absolutely fantastic. She's taken on every single project. She does it at a high level. She's extremely competent. No doubt that she's professional. She can actually even laugh along the way. But seriously, she has been a fantastic asset to the town. And when I say she will be missed, that's not just saying it, that's really meaning it. You've done a great job, Tracy, and thank you for all your help.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do we need a vote to accept that? Or? No? Okay.
We're not accepting it.
All right. So we'll go down to public comment period. I have two things. First, I've had a couple parents, mostly, ask me about recreational space, specifically fields. So what I would like to do is, at a meeting in December, either the next one or the one after, whichever one it fits into, start to talk about options and put together a plan of who should be involved and what we should look at in order to see where we should go. With next steps, I mean, it's a growing town, I get that. I mean, I don't think any of us really wants to spend money, but we'll see what the options are and what we can do. Okay. And the second thing is I'd like to congratulate Eldon. He was recognized on Saturday night by the Samoset Rod and Gun Club. I am told that there were a lot of people there and a lot of food. So congratulations. So there's a picture of it. Congratulations on that recognition, and well deserved.
Well, it was kind of a surprise. They kept it a deep secret. A lot of people that know me would want to have gone, including my two sons that they couldn't make it. But it was so 5-course meal, and it just was super what they done. And I mentioned that, of course, it's a gun club that for years it was all men, and we introduced women into the club. It's one of the best things we ever done. And when I made my little speech afterwards, I just said that the country acknowledged women this year, but take a look at what you see out there. I mean, they totally decorated there, and it was first class all the way. You couldn't ask for anything any better. It was just unreal. And I got a flag from the Congressman Lynch's office. Sheena Barnes presented it, and greetings from the governor. So it was just fantastic all the way. And it was a first class operation. It just that I'm still hearing about it this week there. Why wasn't I invited? It was, it was the last minute thing, but it was well planned. Thank you for recognizing it.
Congratulations, Eldon.
Thank you for being there.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was a classy event, Eldon, and a lot of very, very nice things were said about you. All true. A lot of real nice things, and every word of it was sincere. You've done a lot for this town as well.
Well, we're still trying.
We're grateful for you.
Anything else for public comment period? No? All good? Okay, we'll move along to the town administrator's report. Aidan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first on the agenda, first on my report is, I just want to do a quick overview of what I believe to be a need for Human Resources Director. We've had this conversation, I've had it with each one of you individually in the past, over the past couple of years, and quite frankly, we had the right person. And unfortunately, Tracy is no longer going to be with us. She had done some training over this past year. We had made some investments into her, as we should, for all of our key personnel. And so with that said, I just want to do a quick overview as to where we are and what I'm thinking. The current state is that we really have a decentralized system. Department heads kind of make whatever decisions they make, especially the ones that do not answer to me and to the Board of Selectmen. And as we know, that usually leads to disaster if you're going to have either disparate of treatment between one department and another, or certainly potential legal issues. Those inconsistencies, as I say here, as simple as, do we have job descriptions for every single job? Do we approach all the issues in the same vein? Does one person get suspended, another person get written up, another person have nothing happen? Just can't have that. We are approaching a $40 million budget. We have $1.1 billion worth of assets. And if you went anywhere in the private sector, and if you found out they didn't have an HR director with 258 employees, they would laugh at you. So again, it's just too decentralized, and we need to have one person that's professional and trained to be able to help to oversee this. I currently do all of the investigations, and quite frankly, I don't like to say usually positive things about myself, but all I can tell you is that in 5.5 years, this board has not heard a single grievance. And Eldon, you hired me. You remember you used to see them all the time. So we are doing something right. But the reality is that comes at some expense. I've done HR and I've managed people for 25 years. I have a lot of experience with it. I'm certainly not perfect. I make my mistakes. But the point is that when I'm doing it, I'm not working on some big picture items. And for example, Chairman Kinahan, you just referred to wanting to have more park space or recreational space. I think that is something we definitely need. I want to be able to work on that. Eldon, you've mentioned sewer for years, if not decades. Denise, one of the things that you really want to do is you want to have a more transparent government and make sure that we communicate more. I can't do all those things if I'm also playing an HR person. We need to have somebody that has the experience and the knowledge and the ability to be able to do it so we can continue the trend that we've been on. Simple things. For example, just personnel records. Right now, we're not compliant. I'm not going to get into more details about that for obvious reasons, but the point is that personnel records cannot be intermingled. It used to be that you would have one folder, and inside that one folder you would have anything and everything about that person, and if they've been here for 20 years, that folder would probably be 40 pages thick or so forth. You can't do that anymore. If people call in sick, any medical records cannot be with that individual personnel record. It must be kept in a different record. If there is disciplinary action, that can't be kept in the same folder as payroll records, for example. In essence, what they're asking us to do is to have multiple records. And so when we have space concerns, two is that they have to be hard copies. They can't just be digital. And the third is that I don't actually know every single rule and regulation on this because it's something that continues to evolve and change. So we need to have someone. That's one thing that I had sent Tracy to and learned all of this just 60 days ago, is some of the issues that we have to address. And on top of that, we do a really good job for an employer that does not have an HR department of making sure that we have a lot of policies in place and that people sign their policies. What we do a poor job on is that we do not do it annually or periodically. And the problem with that is, for example, a sexual harassment policy is that somebody signs it when they first come on. They're here for 18 years. There's an issue. And the first thing the lawyer is going to say in defense is going to say, well, did they know about it? We'll show them a signature from 18 years ago. And I'm sure you could see where that one would go. Delivery of communications. It was amazing to me that when I started here is that we really did not communicate to each other. We still have more to go. Don't get me wrong. But when we hire people, we wouldn't send out memos. When somebody was new, we didn't give them all the incorrect information. Fortunately, Maureen downstairs in the treasurer's office is doing a really good job with some upfront information. But as that person then matriculates through as the employee, we don't communicate very well, and we need to do a better job on that. And the last one is interesting, is that we don't have an employee handbook. You know, there is no one central location for an employee to go to be able to identify exactly, do we have a dress code policy, for example? We have a town hall parking policy for employees. People who are here know it. If you're new, you don't. And after a period of time, you may forget it. They don't have a central place to go to. And I had a lengthy meeting with our insurance carrier this past week, and that was one of the things that they harped on, because they actually rate an employer based on their premium, based on whether or not you have an employee handbook. So our premium could go up 7% instead of 6%. And 1% may not sound like a lot, but in $300,000, it's $3,000. So why waste money because we don't have an employee handbook that somebody can go to? Contract negotiations. We know this is a sore spot. And unfortunately, an HR director under the Board of Selectmen and myself is still not going to have full authorization to be able to do contracts with separately elected boards. But we could certainly start to move in that direction. And I know I've spoken to a member of other boards, members of other boards. For example, Assessor Bunker is here. I know she's been in favor of this. I've spoken to Chairman McCarthy. He's in favor of it. We had somebody from the Board of Health here over the summer. You'll recall Brad Piesco. He was in favor of it. And I know they're not the only ones, and I've spoken to people at the library as well. So what we need to do, or at least the way I envision it, is that we would have one person be able to do compensation studies, be able to do all of the analysis and the work for those boards, could also do it for me since I negotiate on your behalf, and then we can use that to benchmark what compensation should be and best practices should be, and then also have a consistent template for our contract. You know, human resources is like a police department. It's like any other department. For somebody who thinks it's just kind of like a guy or a gal that's out there, it's just not accurate. There's a full market for human resources, especially if you go into the private sector. Large companies, I'm sure. Denise, you work for a large company. I guarantee you must have a human resources department. Obviously, you work for the state, Anthony. I know you must have one as well. So this isn't fictitious. This is something that's real that everybody recognizes that we need. Basically, because of staffing, because of cost concerns, trying always to try to squeeze a little bit more water out of the sponge, what I would do is, what I was proposing to do with Tracy, is that we would have the assistant town administrator also be the human resources director. It would allow us still to have direct oversight over the person, and that person then would do all the things here that you would envision an HR person would do, and would still be able to take on some of the responsibilities of the assistant town administrator, and those other ones, as Lorna, who's doing, quite frankly, a really nice job in a short period of time, as she continues to come on speed, she will be able to handle the role that she needs to handle. Department heads would still report to me. They're not going to report to the human resources person. That human resources person is a liaison and is a resource. And the only department that I don't see them interacting with on a daily basis would be the school department. The school department has its own chapter and verse. Under ed reform, we can't be involved. In fact, nobody can be involved in hiring except for the school superintendent. Their contracts are entirely different. They're MTA. They don't work the summers. It's just not a good fit. And as I looked at other cities and towns, HR people on the town side really, they didn't oversee the schools. Schools usually have their own separate person. So again, as I just mentioned earlier, you can look at this, but I've just delineated as to what the duties would be between the confidential secretary and the ATA and human resources director. From a background and experience, an ideal person based on our size and our capacity to pay. I'd like to see somebody with a BA or a BS in public administration and related field. 5 years in municipal government. There's some postings that are out there right now. That seems to be about the basic request. Also, I put in, I would strongly consider somebody with 10 years or more of related experience in lieu of education. Because I could personally tell you, I have 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree, and I certainly learned more doing this job than I ever did in any of the books. And anybody who's done HR or ATA HR for 10 years or more is probably going to have the same experience. Obviously, after they get hired, we still have to pour energy, resources, and money into them, and certainly that would continue to happen. So what I do is that I did a survey of peer communities. What I did was I took the 10 peer communities that I've identified through the Department of Revenue, and then I also did our adjacent communities as well, because when people look for jobs, they don't say, hey, I'm looking for a company that looks what I'm looking for. They also have to consider locality, because obviously, we all live somewhere. So the 13 communities surveyed, 3 had specific people dedicated to human resources. 5 of the remaining 10 then had their assistant town administrator also be their human resources function. So basically 8 out of 13 already do it that way. And I just took all of their compensation. You can see what their average and their median is. And, I would be proposing that we'd be somewhere in the mid 80s or so. That I think would put us competitive. Obviously, it doesn't put us on the top, but it would at least make us competitive with what the going rate is. That's the presentation on that.
Thank you, David.
Moving on, then the last thing is a healthcare opt-out program. This is something that I've been looking to try to target for a couple of years. I'm looking for ways for us to save money. A lot of times we go through the budget process, which is going to start in 30 days, and we can sometimes squabble over $800 in a budget, which, even if you saved $800, nobody's even going to see a penny difference in their tax bill. We have to identify and look for ways that we can save substantial amount of money and be able to either lower the tax bill or allow us to afford other things that right now we don't have. So I was able to survey all of these communities. These are the ones that got back to me over the last couple of weeks. And I've given you an idea or a flavor as to what other cities and towns are doing. And then also Anthony sent me over what GIC is doing at the state level as well. And I listed them in alphabetical order just to make that a little bit easier. So out of these 14 or 15 communities or so, you can see that there is some consistency. They all require, except for one, that somebody has to be on the health care through the town for a minimum of 6 months up to 2 years. The bulk of it is 1 to 2 years. There is some differences as to how they do a payout, whether it's monthly, whether it is sometimes payroll, so it's every other week, once a year or twice a year. And then I also listed as to what the buyouts are. So what the thought process with this is that we spend substantial amount of money on our health insurance, which the next slide in a moment is going to show you. And currently we are spending about $3.1 million. So the thought process is, how is it that I can create a situation that we can still comply with the law, because we have to allow health insurance. But if people have the opportunity to be able to access health insurance through, say, their spouse or in a private sector, or in a private market, can we incentivize those people to do so? So, excuse me 1 second, I'm going to go back. Most of these have payouts somewhere between $1,000, a couple of fours, but basically $1,000 to $3,000. And in calling those town administrators and HR people, they all had fairly similar responses, which were not a lot of people take advantage of them. And I think part of that reason is, quite frankly, I think the payouts are just not aggressive enough. If you're looking at a premium that costs you $12,000 or $10,000, and I'm going to offer you $1,800 to bow out, that's just not enough money. So what I did was that I did a whole bunch of, I'm going to blow this up a little bit. What I did was that I said, okay, how much does it really cost us, and how many people are enrolled? So right now, from the 40 down, that's how many people up top, 40 through 49. So the total is 94. Those are how many people are involved in our individual plan. And you could see the corresponding column as to how much the town currently spends per month for each individual plan. So 40 people, we spend $691 for each one of them, and we spend $82.89 per year for each one of them. And then you could see it so forth and so on. In the second category down, which is 63 through 46, or 112 people, is on our family plan. And you can see that the town's share is between $19,000 and $21,000. I'm sorry, $15,000 and $21,000. So if we went on the high end of what we see that is currently out there, and we offered a 25% savings or an incentive, you would see how much we would be actually providing for a check to those people who may choose to opt out. So an individual plan somewhere between $1,700 and $2,200, and on a family plan somewhere between $4,000 and $5,200. That is not vastly different, though, than what other cities and towns are already offering, and they're not really seeing a lot of savings out of it because a lot of people aren't opting out of the program. If, however, they were to do it, and all I did was I made some assumptions, because what else can I do? Is that under assumption 10% opt out, there are 40 people in line 1. I assume 10%, 4 people opt out. Out of 49, 5 people opt out. I can't do 10% of one person for obvious reasons, so I said 0 savings. And I did the same thing on the family plans. That would give the town a savings of about $223,000. That's pretty good, because if you look down here on the bottom, you'll see out of $223,000, we currently pay $3 million. We'd save 7.5%. Pretty good savings. Again, there's some assumptions there. We don't know who would, if anybody would opt out. But I really think that if we want to try to hit a home run with the plan, I'm looking at potentially doing a 35% incentive. If we do 35%, individual people now are going to get checks for close to $3,000. People on the family plan are going to get $5,500 to $7,000. That may actually start to tip the balance a little bit where somebody strongly considers looking elsewhere for insurance. I used the same 10% assumption because, again, it's a shot in the dark. The hope is that if we were to pay people more money, that we would actually achieve more opt-outs, but we don't know. So again, assuming some 10%, again, just 4 or 5 people, not a lot of people from each one, we save $149,000, and we will see out of that $149,000 is that we would still save about 5%. So again, we could save 5% on our overall budget, we'd be pretty good. This is one of our largest budgets in town, and if the police department or the school department came in and said, we're going to save you 5%, we'd all be happy. So I think we'd be happy on this as well. So no decisions have to be made today because our opt-in period or our open enrollment period is always on July 1st. And what I would like to do is to see as to whether or not the board conceptually is in favor of pursuing this. If so, I would like to be able to have some conversations with other people throughout the entire town to get some feedback. And then we would start to potentially look to implement the program sometime come spring so people could start to take advantage if they so chose for July 1st. The one thing to keep in mind as you do the analysis is that we do have currently 258 employees in town and 206 currently use our insurance. What that means is, potentially, is that there's going to be a handful of people who aren't going to be happy because what they're going to say is, I'm not already on your insurance. Why is it I can't take advantage of it? The reality is that we're doing this to try to save people money, save the town money. This is what the motivation is to save the town money. And if we go back one slide, all these other towns have required that you have already been enrolled for a minimum of 6 months to 2 years, including the state of Massachusetts, which has 500,000 people enrolled in the program. So all we would be doing without reinventing the wheel is to say, look, if you're on our insurance, here's an option. If you're not on our insurance and you want to get on our insurance and you want to pay for it for the next 2 years and then opt out in 2 years, well, I suppose you have that right. Because remember, somebody could opt on to our insurance in 6 months and we can't do anything about it anyway. So it's just one thing I think that we need to keep in mind as we continue to discuss this moving forward. And so I made a recommendation on the bottom line is that if people want to get on the insurance with just the desire to get off it, then I think that 2-year rule to be on our insurance at a minimum probably makes the most amount of sense. Again, they're more than welcome to do it, but I don't want someone just to do it to play the system. I've had a conversation with the treasurer, and he said that to do it bi-weekly or monthly would be administratively burdensome on them. So he would do it he would recommend once a year or twice a year. Personally, because again, my focus is to try to drive this where people take advantage of it, is that I would recommend twice a year. Because if I said to somebody who's getting $6,000 for the year, he has $3,000 in December, and people are buying holiday gifts, that might be an incentive, because they're going to say, I got some extra money. And then in June, everybody always seems to want money for vacation. So that seemed to be a good split. And again, to do that, it would be 35%. And again, we save about 5%. But again, that's just my recommendation. And obviously, it's a moving target. So that's the presentation on it at this point.
Thank you, David. Yeah, we can do some questions now, but I think we need to provide the overall direction of, do we want to go forward and pursue it with more in-depth
So
analysis?
this is strictly volunteer, right?
Absolutely.
So you don't, well, it all depends on your circumstances. If you had somebody or you had a spouse who's working that has other insurance, and, but like me, I'm kind of like stuck in there, you know?
Right.
So it wouldn't be.
Yeah, so nothing
what
would
I'd be
change.
doing, you know?
Yeah, nothing would change.
Correct.
Denise?
Any particular reason why you picked these towns?
Sure. So what I do is I go to the Department of,
I was just thinking
Oh,
like
we're going back to
Berkeley,
HR.
the Bridgewaters aren't in here.
well, the two Bridgewaters are. I'm so sorry. You mean on this here? This is
Right.
because this is who responded to the survey.
Okay.
This was flat out. I sent it all out. I just shotgunned it to 50 communities, and this is who responded within the last 2 weeks. And then the ones that responded, I then picked up the phone and made some calls. I know Easton is in here. I have a very good relationship with Connor, so he's always very responsive. I know that they do not have one in East Bridgewater. I spoke to George a couple of weeks ago, and I do not know if they do anything in Bridgewater. I've not spoken to Michael about it.
I mean, I'm familiar with the concept because I opted out of the town's insurance. I opted out of my own company's insurance because my husband carries the insurance, and it makes sense. And there is a small, incentive to do so. So it does make sense, and you can clearly save quite a bit of money. I'm just wondering how many town employees might be interested.
Yeah.
Did you plan to do a survey?
So we can do that. I think once we get the information out, that's part of what I'm looking for. Is I'm looking for any feedback that people are willing to provide. So let's see what people say.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should keep going with it.
I think so.
And see where it leads.
Yeah.
Could we also go back? I did have a question about the HR director.
Sure.
When you surveyed the towns, David, and I'm trying to find that slide. 26. Okay. Some of the towns that one of the towns I've looked at quite a bit and compared us to was Berkeley. Was there any reason why we don't include Berkeley?
Yeah, because Berkeley's just not a comparable town. So what I did was you had sent me that list, and so I actually did a whole bunch of homework, and I'll share some information with you. But for example, Berkeley, their budget is $21 million. Ours is $35 million. It would just knock us out of it. It's not a fair comparison. Dayton is 21 million, Halifax is 23 million. So what I did in order to create this list is that I go to the Department of Revenue website. I first control for budget size, because at the end of the day, town meeting controls, and town meeting is determined that they want this to be a full service community. Because, for example, Berkeley does not have a professional fire department. They have chosen not to fund one. So that's their choice.
Okay.
We have chosen to have a professional fire department. So I control for budget first. And then what I do is I say, okay, within 5 or so above and 5 or so below, I do not want to go outside of 10%. So that way the town of West Bridgewater becomes the median based on its budget. In all of these towns, Hamilton through Lincoln, those are 10 towns that all fit in that category. There was 3 towns that I knocked out. And the 3 towns was Orleans, Provincetown, and Williamstown. I knocked out the two ones on the Cape because they're both 6,000 to 7,000 during the winter, but they're 30,000 during the summer. They have things like harbor masters that we don't have. They have worries about parks and beaches that we don't have. And so they're not similar communities, and they do not border a city like we do with the town of Brockton, which is one reason why, if you look at metrics, our police department is larger than it should be based on its population, but it's because of who we border that we have to have police. Williamstown does not even have a full-time police department, but I knock out anything that's west of Worcester because they just don't offer full services. They don't have a major highway like Route 24 that goes through. They don't have to worry about large cities that border them, and most of them do not have a full-time professional fire department or police department. Most western towns rely on the state police for police services. So all I did was I just took out those three, and these were the ones that were left, and they were all fairly similar population-wise. They're dead on budget-wise. And then again, I add the Bridgewaters and Easton. They're not comparable from a demographic standpoint, but when you look for a job in the private sector, you may drive an hour and 15 minutes for a job, but most people won't. But they look for a job, say, within 30 minutes or so. And so the Bridgewaters and Easton has some of the same pressures we do with Route 24 and Route 106. And they're also, because they're close, a lot of people, especially in municipal government, they don't travel far. So they're comparing local towns, so I use them as part of the survey as well.
So that being said, I was more looking, when I was saying Berkeley, I was more looking towards the number of town employees. So for these particular towns, that's what I was curious about, the number of town employees.
Yeah, so the Department of Revenue doesn't provide that number. The only way I'd have to contact each town individually and ask them what it is. I just control for the budget, and again, my methodology is that the town has determined over the course of 30 years since Proposition 2.5, how much are we willing to spend, and therefore what do we want our town to look like, and budget is always reflective of that. And so I just controlled for that first, and then made sure population has to be close in those other items.
Should nail that down just for once and for all. It seems like I come to these meetings a lot and we have this discussion about how you came to what towns you used for comps, and it would seem to me that, you know, starting with this list, you could get to a list of towns that everybody agreed on were comparable, and you could just always use that list of towns. And
That's what I'm hoping. If we get an HR director and someone with the qualifications, they can start looking at, okay, when we compare salaries for whatever department, what are the comparable towns? Because when I looked at, for example, Berkeley, as far as number of plowable roads and DPW work, spot on. But like you said, budget-wise, they don't have a full-time fire department, so they're not comparable to us there. But you're absolutely right. We should be able to look at salaries for comparable towns, benefits for comparable towns, staffing of departments for comparable towns as well. Because it seems like we are flying blind. So it does make sense to have an HR director.
I don't think we are. I will say David has done a good job of that when contracts have come up. I think.
Let me rephrase that. I didn't mean that way, David. We're not flying blind because of what you're doing, but I know one of the things we've talked about is the fact that we have departments that are on their own because they're elected boards. We have no control over. You don't have the time to spend with them. And if we had a person who was an HR director and an assistant, that would be their expertise. You'd be able to lend that more to the other departments. So I didn't mean we were flying blind because of what you were doing. But thank you for pointing that out, that I said that.
You know, where I see this here, we've gone through pretty rough times lately here. We've lost Mallory to Dayton, and we're losing Tracy. And of course, I think I talked to David, I don't know, a little bit to Anthony, and really haven't discussed this with Denise at length. And to put somebody else on, even if we feel that something like this is needed, okay? Now what we're doing is we're bringing people in And we go to titles, and all of a sudden they're assistant administrator. I mean, for me to vote for this, we're gonna have to look at administrator, or are we gonna keep this as 2 secretaries? Or are we gonna advance somebody that does good here again to administrator, and then they leave like they leave? I like to see something like this incorporated, because David says $80,000, but that don't include benefits. And when you build in all the benefits and everything else, it's gonna cost a lot more than $80,000, okay? And I would like to see something like that built in to, when we do vote for a secretary or something like that, maybe with the ability of being able to handle this human resource job at the same time. I know that there's certain times of the years, and like right now, when somebody leaves, like Tracy leaves, it leaves quite a shock on David and also Lana over there. And but after that, and of course, then after that, we get into budgets, and we get busy again. I mean, I know, but I'm not against, this type of thing. It's probably needed, but I'm against the way we're going to do this.
Well, just for clarification, we're not increasing headcount. Headcount stays the same, correct?
Correct. So the benefits and all that will already be, they're already essentially accounted for. I think, it's unfortunate that Tracy's left, but I think it does show something. Tracy, Mallory, they've all left and they've all moved up a level. It's not like they're leaving and going to an equal position somewhere else just to leave. I think it shows that they're ready to take on the next step. And with a small staff, a small town, it's hard to keep someone for too long who's eager to move up, because there just sometimes isn't anywhere for that person to go after that. But I do think, in terms of an HR director, I think we absolutely need someone. We need to be consistent, and we especially need other boards and committees to be part of this and to work with the HR director. Anything
I agree.
else?
No.
All right. So that's everything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?